Welcome to Victory or Death, the podcast for content creators. I'm your host, Elijah MacDougall, and this is my co-host, Dan Dorn.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing today, Dan?
I am doing well. This is actually the first time I've actually been at home recording this podcast. The two earlier times I've been away, house sitting, trying to make that work. But I'm comfy. I'm at
Good.
home.
I'm glad you're
Yes.
back in your usual space. Got your nice, crisp YouTuber voice going this time.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I got a new chair.
Oh,
So that's exciting. The last one that I had squeaked a lot. So that was just unfortunate for all sorts of different reasons.
I'm hoping to get a new chair soon as well. We'll see how that goes. Because we will be moving, so I'm sure there will be a lot of furniture to
Oh.
get. But yeah, so what are we talking about today, Dan?
So we're eventually going to get to the idea of passion versus performance as motivators for content creators.
Hmm.
But first, I think we're going to talk about what we've been doing this past couple of weeks.
Yeah. Why don't you lead off with that?
All right, so we've talked about this a couple of times now, but I've changed my content creation schedule from weekly to every other week, and just sort of getting into the swing of that, and it feels awesome. It is so good. This past Monday, I did not post a video, but I researched for an upcoming video that I'll finish this Monday, and I wrote the script. And so I had just a great chunk of time on Monday to sort of relax and do those things well without having to rush through creating a video, editing, uploading, posting, creating the JPEG thumbnail, in the afternoon. So having it spread out over a couple of weeks just makes a world of difference, and I think I'll be able to even make better quality content uh, just with the more time. And so I really enjoyed it. It's taken a lot of pressure off of my workflow.
Oh,
So
that's good. I was wondering if kind of slowing your roll a little bit would give you more time to add some polish, but that sounds about right.
yeah, absolutely. And I even had time to begin sort of working on pieces of a more long-term project, so that like these mini reviews that I do of video games don't have to be smashed into really condensed play sessions. So I started playing parts of Metal Gear Solid 5 this
Ooh,
Monday to do some analysis of that game.
that's a very good game. It's
Yeah,
very
do you
trippy.
like it?
Yeah, I
Okay.
played it. I played it back in college on PlayStation 4.
Oh, it might be too much for me, Eli. I don't know.
It's just super weird. It's Hideo Kojima's storytelling is just off the wall. Um,
Yeah.
I
I mean,
did
I
play.
had no idea, but I totally understand.
It's just this weird political thriller for anybody who doesn't know what it is. But we're getting off topic. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, maybe I should go ahead and tell people that my channel is the Mildly Morose Man on YouTube, and I cover everything Beyond Good and Evil and Beyond Good and Evil 2. And so I do videos on news, but also analysis and oh, what is that called when you think about what the game could be?
Predictions or like
Predictions, yeah, all that
comparisons.
sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, comparisons. So that's what I'm all about.
Well, on my end of things, my podcasts are going pretty strong. I just recorded another episode of Interview, which is my new podcast. And that is going to be with a guy named Brandon Gordon, who's also known as Chad the Impaler on his podcast,
Oh my
Surviving
gosh.
the Narcissist Apocalypse. He's actually writing a book, and it started off as this kind of funny podcast, but it became this like legitimate thing where he'd interview people who have gone through therapy from living with narcissists.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
become kind of like this sitting down, chatting, both of them talking about their experiences with type B personality disorders and
Okay.
kind of getting through life. So it's a much more serious podcast than it started out,
Yeah.
but he's a really cool guy, and I look forward
Okay.
to dropping that next Monday. So not not this week, but next week.
Awesome. And you had just published an interview with a guy. Was his name Matt?
Marco.
Marco, and he works with T.
Yes, I grew up with him. He was one of my in scare quotes 10 brothers that I grew up with. My parents worked at a group home boarding school kind of
awesome.
thing. So I grew up with him, and we lost contact for about 10 years. So that episode was us officially reconnecting for the first time and kind of talking about where he's gone since we haven't seen each other.
Okay. And does he have like an official place where he's putting out media?
Yeah. So he's doing a photo blog on Instagram.
Okay.
His handle is @steepedtea. But he's also going to be starting up an actual like blog site called Steeped. So should be within the next couple months here. He should be completely on the media train. So
hey, good for him.
Yeah. So I've just been talking to people and hoping for the best, basically.
Yeah. Well, I know that's like a big vision for you and Victory or Death. I mean, to be sort of a platform for networking for creatives. So
yeah, all that cross-pollinating of audiences to try to help smaller people grow, help people find niche podcasts that they're going to be interested in, and kind of just create this nice feedback loop for any of my current, past, and future guests to kind of reap the benefits of being on the show.
Yeah. Okay. So how long have you been doing this?
Not very.
But like at least a couple of months, maybe 3?
No. Our first podcast was last month, so we're going on podcast number 4. So we're just going heavy with the content every week. We got something coming.
Yes.
So like
you really jumped right into it. That's what's so cool.
I had been waiting since like beginning of June, end of May to really like do it, but I'm like, I've got so much stuff coming up, I can't. So I was making all these plans before we went on vacation at the end of June or beginning of July, whatever it was. And they totally didn't pan out quite right. So I kind of just recorrected, and I was just like, hey, Dan, let's make a podcast. You're like, sure, let's do it. So here we are.
Yeah. And it's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
I have too. It's been really fun. I have a love for radio, and if you listen to the coming episode of Interview, you'll kind of hear me talk about that a little bit more. But we're doing podcasting, which is something that I never thought I'd actually be doing.
Yeah, I had no idea I would ever do this. But it's a lot of fun.
It is.
It is a lot of fun. And I appreciate your passion for podcasting.
Oh, thank you. I feel like I probably don't know enough about it, but the podcasting subreddits have been very helpful. So learning a lot every week, trying to fill my head with more information, pass on anything that I have already learned to people who are just starting. So kind of putting into practice that documentation process.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're active on the Reddit as well.
Trying to be.
Okay. Yeah.
But
good deal.
Yeah. So
you've probably been passionate about this work, I guess, since its beginning. I guess, could I just ask you, like, what motivates you most to create content at this point?
So, as a writer and designer, I kind of went into hibernation after I got out of college. I wrote a couple short stories here and there, tried to enter a few, writing contests, but nothing really came of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I altogether stopped designing for about a year and a half, a little bit less maybe. And I felt this gnawing hunger in me, like just that I couldn't deal with not creating something anymore.
Mm-hmm.
When I decided that I wanted to start trying to leave my full-time retail job, I started thinking about ways that I could put my skills back into use and that started getting me thinking about the content creation process a little bit. And so tried to get back into designing a little bit, tried to start writing a blog to try to get those juices kind of working and flowing again. And I started giving myself some quiet time when I could to just think about how I wanted to make something, because I felt kind of aimless just making design pieces, and I felt kind of aimless just writing blog posts, like they weren't really working towards anything. And so we talked a little bit about this last episode, but I finally got to the point where I said, all right, I need a plan, and I need to do something that's different than just writing or just design work. Like I need to blend the two together, and then ultimately kind of spin that even more, so that it wasn't just like I'm a writer and designer. Like I don't necessarily do any traditional writing for these podcasts, but I do a lot of pre-writing in my head for like how I want to go through these things and how I want to talk about what I'm going to talk about, and then bringing that design aspect into like the album cards for each episode. And
Sure.
so I started blending those together, and I'm like, well, what else can I do though? Because writing it in itself is very rarely a skill that you can just make money on.
Okay.
So I realized that I do a lot of thinking, I do a lot of dissection, and so this is like the pretty much the most even cross section of like doing something academic, and writing and design that I can. So that's kind of how I got here. And that to answer your question about the passion, I just needed to kind of prelude that whole thing. Is my desire to have a reason to design and to have a reason to write, and then subsequently also have a reason to create, all kind of converge on the podcasting point. And it feels like something that I can actually do and doesn't have a massive gated wall like the art community has, where like I need to be a much better artist than I am to really build a following. And I lack the passion to be solely an artist or solely a designer or solely a writer. I want to do all
Right.
those things. So all my passions kind of
Yeah.
converge onto this spot. So that's what keeps me going, is knowing that like I can do this, and it's not hard, but it's also not effortless. Like it requires me to continue to learn and to become more proficient in how I think and how I communicate ideas, which is something that I'm always looking to grow with. So I want to continue to challenge myself. I have things in mind that gives my passion some legs, but I'll let you chime in.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of the passion came with like your imagination to try and fit the puzzle pieces of your personality together to carve out like a space for you in media on the internet, where all of these things could come together and really like craft something that people would come to and want to listen to and learn from and just really receive value from. That your passion sort of drove that all together.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like, yeah, like if I get content with just making a podcast, like eventually I'll probably lose steam. That's just kind of how I am. If I get too far into being comfortable, I'm like, yeah, all right, challenge is over. Like I'm not interested anymore. Which is why I'm continuing to try to set new milestones ahead of me. Which is
Right.
partially why I'm trying to do a podcast every week, whether it's this or interview. And eventually, if this venture starts to produce income that I don't have to work full time anymore, I want to push into making more podcasts. Like I have some ideas on the back burner that I'm already kind of trying to develop and think about people that I'd want to partner with, to kind of keep that going. Um, with the long-term goal of hopefully being able to turn this thing into an actual media company,
Right.
and trying to just go further and do more, and
Yeah.
I guess kind of leave my legacy the best way I know how. Not that I'm like nervous to not leave a legacy, but I figure I've been given the gifts and I might as well use them to their most. And in my mind, the most is leaving some sort of memorable legacy behind.
Okay. And so something you brought up just there, I feel like sort of brings this topic to a head for me personally. this idea of like passion versus performance, and
Mhm.
what our motivation should be as creators.
Hmm.
Because the idea, I think, comes down to like, can we make these, maybe more dream job types of media content creation, can we make those actually provide an income for us?
Hmm.
And if we can, how can we save ourselves from not like selling out or doing it for the money, like
Hmm.
those kinds of things? Because I think it's like it's way too easy for us to just think, oh, somebody should just do the thing that they're passionate about. And if your heart's not in the right way, then you shouldn't be doing it. I don't think sometimes we're not realistic with the idea that we as people do need an income. I mean, we have to provide for ourselves and sometimes often for others, like
Mhm.
if we're a part of a family or something like that. So what I mean, no, this would be you looking ahead a little bit, but
Mhm.
looking ahead, are there any safeguards for you from like the idea of selling out or being totally focused on performance as opposed to creating content from your passion?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I'll be honest, I haven't totally thought through that entire thing, especially like the selling out part.
Right.
So I'll do my best to answer it. Cut me off if I start rambling. I give you permission.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
I shouldn't, but just in case I do. So I think the idea of selling out is really scary for a lot of people, and especially like true artists get very nervous about like getting taken over by someone with a big wallet, and deep pockets, and
Yeah.
if they make it to the point where they get noticed by someone, like that becomes a very real problem. But I think the way things are going right now, selling out looks a lot different than it used to, right? So like
Hmm.
selling out might be in the past might have been abandoning your beliefs and your morals for a big paycheck and basically becoming a subservient of some sort of corporation. Um,
Right.
if a corporation wants to sponsor my show, give me a decent amount of money, I'd probably do it with the understanding that I'm a to consumer content creator.
Hmm.
So the restrictions that would be placed on me if I were a direct to business and then to consumer would look a lot different. As a content creator, I have some leverage to say, hey, I would love your sponsorship, but you got to unwrap some of that red tape. If they are going to say no, then I'm sure there's another sponsor somewhere. And I'll keep doing what I'm doing and hope for the best. If I'm making money off this podcast and suddenly I have to turn down a sponsor that like suddenly I'm going to be in trouble, right? Because I'm direct to consumer. If I start running into
Hmm.
issues, I can say, hey guys, if you really enjoy my podcast, please consider donating. I'm going through a rough patch, whatever. Or conversely, I personally would prefer to not even have to ever get to the point where I have to monetize my audience. So I wouldn't mind taking those sponsorships. But if push comes to shove, I'll just work another job and continue to do the podcast on my off time as I'm doing now. Like doing a
Right.
podcast on a Saturday isn't a problem. To achieve my goals in the business sense, I might have to quote unquote sell out a little bit. Like I might need to become a corporate partner, but this is why I'm trying to compartmentalize what I'm doing, right? So like if I
Okay.
start working with a company to get some sort of sponsorship, I can offer something other than my podcasts. Because my podcast could be like the vehicle in which they advertise their product on or whatever, like assuming that it's something that I actually enjoy or agree with, on a moral basis.
Right.
But I can offer them something other than my podcast, right? I can say, hey, in order for this thing to be mutual, like I can offer you my writing skills, I can offer you my design skills. So
Hmm.
it's not just, oh, basically they own my podcast now.
Right.
Does that
Yeah.
answer your
Because
question?
like, yeah, yeah. Like you still used the words like kind of sell out, like a little bit, which I don't think you have to use like that phrase if you're engaging in like some sort of business relationship that happens
Right.
to show up in the podcast.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, because you're like as we've talked about it, the vision for your business company platform is that you would have a lot of different business relationships with
Mhm.
various content creators where you would be designing merchandise for them. And so those are necessarily like business relationships, and that's
Mhm.
not a bad thing.
No, definitely not.
And I think I just feel like there's this stigma behind um, people making money off of content creation.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay. So maybe this is what you were saying by selling out. Then maybe we weren't talking on the same point. Let me ask you a question. Where do you see people like furthering that stigma? Because I end up seeing the opposite a lot. So I'm interested in seeing.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Oh, that's a good question. So I recently sort of got attacked a little bit. Uh,
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, I now I remember.
Okay.
uh, and this was on a social media platform. I was doing my thing, trying to engage the community, promote one of my videos,
Mhm.
and this guy was just really antagonistic. And, he was criticizing me for making content about video games, and he sort of made this mass broad generalization about all video game creators are just trying to make quick videos to make a quick buck.
I mean,
And
did he actually watch your video?
see, I don't think he did. And he probably doesn't know that, based on how many subscribers I have and just the size of my channel, I can't even monetize my videos right now. So it was sort of an odd experience, but
Okay.
it made me it got me thinking. It got me thinking.
Okay. So I think I know then like so there's not a stigma amongst content creators that like making money is bad because we're all like, yeah, making money is really good and we would like to make money because money puts food in our bellies and pays our bills.
Right.
Um, so amongst content creators, we're all trying to basically share our experiences to try to figure out like some sort of golden medium where like you don't have to be subservient to like YouTube, for example, to make your money, especially because YouTube basically just isn't paying people very well anymore.
Right.
So they're
Yeah.
using crowdfunding platforms to achieve that, or donations, and because they're direct to consumer, like they can just find there are, 1,000 people and ask for $5 and they will get it every time. And that's how they make their money. With people who are not content creators, who are the consumer, if they're not plugged really into trying to understand content creation, they see it as a quick cash grab and they see it as something that you can basically do in 5 minutes. Because what they're seeing content creation as is the same thing as posting a comment on Facebook or just posting a photo on Instagram or just something really quick and simple, right? Like they think that
Right.
you sitting down to make your video maybe takes you an hour and then
Yeah.
you just profit. And that makes people really angry because pretty much anybody who doesn't understand what it is to be creative and knows of people who have tried to make a quick buck via YouTube just lump us
Right.
all into a category because we're not doing quote unquote real work. And to basically
Right.
just summarize down the point, it's that they don't understand that like there's been a shift in the market, but also not understanding that this stuff takes real time and real energy. And there's a lot of investment that goes into the front end, like getting equipment. Like in theory, you could start a podcast with your smartphone and nothing else because you can use a platform like Anchor. And if you have a smartphone, even if it's really crappy, as long as it has a microphone and can run an app, like
Right.
you can make a podcast and in theory start making money um, if you're compelling enough, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
So people see that as like an easy way out. No, it's not an easy way out. It's a smart way if you're someone who is able to engage. If you have a high enough charisma, you can basically turn an hour of effort into lucrative amounts of money. But you have to
Right.
be really good, and that usually doesn't come overnight. So if
Yeah.
there is anybody listening to this who does think that content creation is a sham, just like remember that a lot of the people who are quote unquote big now and are like YouTube celebrities, they spent years cultivating that. Lots of man hours. Like if you look at Casey Neistat, like the dude, he's a vlogger for anyone who doesn't know. He's a guy who just like moved to New York one day and like just tried to swing it, and he did it because he was smart enough to be able to figure out how to survive, and he happened to have some good fortune in bumping into people who were willing to help him. But like there's a lot of risk that comes with content creation, especially if you're abandoning quote unquote real work to go
if you're
do it.
diving in, yeah.
So most content creators have a full-time job and this is just their hobby. And so I think the people who like the guy who's criticizing you or gal, whomever, like they might just not understand that like you're not doing this full time and you're not making money on it right now, that you're passionate about it, right?
Yeah, yeah. But yet I still, you know, I'm passionate about it, and I love video games, and I really enjoy the world of Beyond Good and Evil.
Hmm.
But I mean, especially when I was on like a weekly schedule, I mean, there were days where I just like had to really just put it to the grind,
Hmm.
and just get to it. And it's not like I was just gushing with love for video games and Beyond Good and Evil at that point. I was really doing it because I had set my mind on a goal, and I wanted to see if I could make this YouTube channel thing work.
Which I guess gets into the other half of the discussion, which is performance. I'd say performance and perseverance, kind of like using them interchangeably there.
Ah, that might even be a better word.
Well, I mean, performance is still a key part of the process, right? Because if you have a lot of passion and you're spending a lot of time, but you're not putting in a good product, like performance still matters.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah.
so I'd say
And I
it's like,
think. Oh,
yeah.
well, that's another thing. No, you keep going.
So like the performance piece is just like how well your thing lands and how much viable effort you put into it in terms of like making it viable, not just like, oh yeah, I spent 2 hours doing this thing, and you're like, wow, that's a steaming pile of nothing. Like you have to
Right.
put
Yeah.
2 hours into something and have that work be shown as viable in whatever product you're putting out anyway.
Right. Well, I thought of a couple of things, but one, I mean, some of the videos that I put the most work into have some of the least amount of views on my YouTube channel. Um, and I don't think maybe it's partly knowing my audience. It's also people, a lot of people probably don't care about my voice necessarily at this point. And the stuff that is unique and isn't just grabbing a bit of news, but doing deep analysis on, the original video game.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of work,
Hmm.
I don't know, the feedback, it's not as strong. It doesn't match the amount of hours that I put into a project, like an analysis on the vehicles and Beyond Good and Evil, versus like, rounding up some character news or character creation news for Beyond Good and Evil 2.
Hmm.
I have to put in different sets of hours for those two projects, but one way outperforms the other.
Yeah. Um, and so that's where a lot of people get hung up, especially when they are passionate, like you and I are, and then they're
Mhm.
not seeing the kind of numbers that they think that they need to be seeing to have made that effort worth it. A good example of this is our first episode did 35 downloads. For not having any audience, that's pretty good in my book, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good, yeah.
Our second episode, given how I borked the audio quality on it, I over de-amplified the audio too much, so it started to sound like a tin
Oh.
can and really quiet. Um,
Oh, dang it.
but yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
still listenable, but it's just not as engaging to listen to because there is definitely something off about it. And so that one has like 18 downloads, and I technically like posted about that one the same amount as my pilot
Mhm.
or as our pilot. But people like pilot episodes because they know what they're getting into, or they like to learn what they're getting into. But then interview, the first episode of that, I hyped less hard than the first episode, and I got
Okay.
very similar numbers. So overall,
Interesting.
we're like almost to 80 downloads across our 3 episodes, which is crazy to me.
Hey. Yeah. That's
Like that's a
exciting.
big deal. Um, especially because like I get like maybe 0.05% engagement on Facebook. Um,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
so like yeah, like the stats are just not in my favor, yet we're still getting listens. But I can look at the two that are the higher quality and say, yeah, okay, so I'm getting the same number of plays on those. So it might be something to do with the quality of the second episode that it's not getting a lot.
Right.
However, that's not always the case. We put more effort into the first episode. We definitely put less effort into the second one. And when it comes to your YouTube videos, it could be anything just down to the title of the video. Like there's so much there that
Oh yeah.
can factor into why someone's not listening to it or engaging with it. But this is exactly why, as a young content creator, and for any young content creators out there, you need to buckle down on quickest workflow you possibly can without cutting corners, because you need to maximize your return on investment, even if it's just still having a few hours left in the day. Because you need to build those good habits, because there will be a point where you're going to need to be putting out maybe 2 videos a week at some point, and you need to be able to just cut and drop, cut and drop, cut and drop, cut and drop. And it needs to be just as good as the last, if not better. So when people realize that they need to persevere and perform, this is what shuts a lot of people off, because it gets hard and they don't want to do it. So like you, knowing yourself already, you're scaling back the expectation on yourself and just trying to put out better product, all the while also trying to find ways to cut down your workflow. So you're not burning yourself out, pouring yourself into this one video. And if it doesn't perform, it doesn't perform. Like it's not the end of the world for you. You're building up a portfolio of what you can do. So either way, it benefits you. But then there's YouTubers who, like small YouTubers, there's a subreddit literally called Small YouTubers. If you ever want to check it out. And it's really, it's not great. Let me put it that way. There's a community there. There's a community there. But I say it's not great because you got a lot of guys who are trying to just shortchange. Like they're trying to use clickbait video thumbnails or. So this is the one where I called someone out on it because I got sick of seeing it. He had a very not safe for work photo of a woman in his thumbnail. And it had nothing to do with this video. And I said, this is clickbait and you know it. Why are you doing this? And he goes, no, man, that's just my girlfriend. I'm like, that is no. That is not.
Yeah,
come on. But like people are just trying to utilize the like get rich quick idea and it doesn't work. So those people might have passion for money and they want to make money, but they don't want to persevere, right? So if you want to be a really good business person, you need to have a passion for money, and you need to have a passion, and you need to persevere. Like you need to do both. I don't identify with those people because I don't have a passion for money. I like money, but I don't like it a lot. I like having money to occasionally buy something that I want and maybe buy some furniture every now and again. But like, I don't need to have money to feel good about myself. I just need some money to survive and feel like I can maybe make an investment in a house or something, right? But when you're an artist, you have to have the passion for the thing you're doing, but you also have to have the ability to persevere and perform consistently so that you can make a name for yourself. So you have to have one of those two things. You can't just have passion for money, and you can't just have passion for the art, and you can't just persevere and not like money or not like the art, because then you're just going to be grinding on something that's going to burn you out. And like you might like the thing, you might like money, you might like art, but you can't just like it and then persevere and try to perform, because
it'll be hard.
It'll be really hard, and you'll start seeing immediately.
Just across the board. Yeah, it's hard.
But this is why natural born artists, even people who are not good at art when they first start as kids, can get better because they're getting enjoyment from it. but they haven't internalized yet that they're constantly drawing over and over again is the perseverance in performing. So the most ideal situation for an artist is that they get pretty good by the time they realize that they can start making money on it, or else it becomes extremely frustrating for them. Like me. I'm proficient in art, but I get very frustrated when my drawing skills don't get better because I recognize that like if I just lower my standards and practice for maybe a couple more years, I'll be in a great spot, right? But like I can't afford to not do the things that like I'm passionate about and could make me money and
Right.
just do that. So like
So you can't hone your skill as you wish you could
right,
because you
because I
don't
don't
have
have
the
that.
time.
I don't have the time and freedom anymore. But I have
Right.
found something where I can use what drawing skills I have to plan my ideas and to maybe get things across so that I can put them into effect with my other skills. So like I'm never gonna be a painter probably, and I'm never probably gonna end up being a famous illustrator, but I might be able to use what proficiency I have to help me in my design work or whatever, you know. I guess the other part of this conversation to kind of start closing it out and to give you some time to talk to is knowing when to kind of like say it's been good enough and cut your losses. Or
Okay.
say, okay, the amount of time that I put into this thing is good enough. I'm not going to practice it diligently anymore, but like I can use it enough to help me in other stuff. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. And actually, I mean, it might be sort of an encouragement to people. Like, if you're at a place where you can analyze your work and you realize that the performance, I mean, whatever you're creating or doing, is in one place and it could grow to like the next level, whatever that might be, then you're probably actually in a decent spot.
Hmm.
Like you probably have skills enough to create good content. I mean, if you have that awareness, like, oh, like I see where I could hone my skill a little bit. That I think that means that somebody's probably steeped enough in the skill itself, whether that's like video editing, storytelling, drawing, photography, whatever it might be. Like if you have that sort of awareness, then you're probably in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I just also like that this episode also it started with two things, passion and performance, but it added another third, which is perseverance. And we had such a nice sort of trifecta topic last episode. And we've ended with this sort of like three theme, I guess the motivations for content creation.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good way to put it is like the three things that you need to kind of weigh in balance in order to start on the road of content creation. And I
Yeah.
think like the amount of passion you have eventually does have to wane just a little bit and give way to a little bit more of that perseverance and performance because you start to just get that momentum and the passion becomes less important, but you still need to hold it in ratio so that you're not just dead inside making really good stuff and then
Yeah,
just being
yeah.
like all of this money and all of this praise and everything just isn't doing it for me because that's just as bad because eventually all of your performance all of your passion's going to run out and then there's going to be no heart to your stuff anymore.
Yeah. So you
So
need to take time to foster the passion.
you need to take time to foster it. And you also need to be able to look at something and say, hey, I think I've done this long enough now. I think I just need to walk away and try something else.
Mhm.
And as content creators, we start to think about all of these things and how to make money. You start thinking about it as a business. But you know how many people have walked away from the businesses they started and done something else? Like you're without getting into a broader discussion, like you're creating an intellectual property with your content creation. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean that someday down the road you can't pass it off to someone else and then go do something different that also excites you.
Right.
Because the greatest thing that we have as content creators is our brain and the way that we think about things. I mean, if we were smart enough to sit down and make good content and make a successful business out of it, what else can you do? You don't have to do it forever, especially if you start like losing interest in it. You can apologize to your audience and say, hey, I got to wash my hands of this thing. I'm either going to leave you in the care of someone who really wants to take over my mantle, or you can say, hey, I'm closing down this section of my business and I'm going to move into something else. If you would like to follow me, I'd appreciate it. But if you're not, I completely understand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So there's no need to be afraid of like foraging a new path.
never. You just have to have enough sense to either do it or don't. I mean, you don't want to do it
Mhm.
too early.
Oh, sure. Yep. Yep.
Like, you don't want to quit too early. I'd say giving something a solid year of your time is probably your best bet. And if it's really not showing any fruit, really burnt out on it, it might be time to either take a break or move on to something else.
Yeah.
But
And that alone, I mean, that could be affected by so many different factors. But that was actually that was my plan. That's the idea that I had was I would give this YouTube channel a year's time, and we're about halfway through that year, and so I'll sort of assess the journey that I've
Mhm.
had over the past year, this December, January, and I'll just take another look at the channel and see where I want to go from there.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not working out, you've got actually a decent portfolio. If you ever wanted to try to get a job in video editing or whatever, like you easily do that. Or if you wanted to switch over to podcasting, I mean, you already opened the door for that just by being on this show. So like, it's just good to stay busy as a content creator. Giving yourself as many options as possible is always really nice. I feel really bad for YouTubers, especially who. This kind of gets into my hot take. If you're ready to do hot takes.
Yeah, we can transition to hot takes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So there's this small YouTuber who used to commit all of his content creation time to a video game series called Borderlands. Um, and the publisher of Borderlands, 2K Games, went after this guy because he started getting information from an inside source and he started leaking it like a good journalist would always do. At least a good video game journalist. I'm not going to say like a good journalist should just leak information, but
Yeah, right.
it's common practice in the video game industry
Oh yeah,
that
absolutely.
you leak stuff and it's fun, right? But 2K decided to go after this guy and basically ruin him. They
Mm,
sent private investigators to his house. They basically grilled him. They copyright claimed almost all of his videos, or I'm probably going to regret saying that, a decent portion of his videos, because I don't know the number exactly. But there was
okay.
talk that if it continued, that he just might be done by the end of the week. And I think he basically indicated that like it's not worth the trouble anymore. But the problem is that this small guy got made an example out of, but then the other big news outlets, or the bigger video game news outlets on YouTube, reported on those same leaks and they didn't get touched.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I said it before, video game YouTubing can be really volatile, and I think it's important to
Yes.
constantly take steps back and look at your work and say, okay, is there a way that I can exonerate myself that if like this whole like video game thing just goes down the drain, like I'm not screwed? But no one ever expects to have a very powerful video game publisher just come and basically turn you off and say, you're done. We don't like you.
No. Yeah, that's wild.
So that's my hot take.
Yeah.
If you happen to be a video game content creator, just keep taking steps back. I think, Dan, you're doing good stuff though, because you're not just saying, "Oh, this video is about this could be on Good and Evil News." Like you're trying to create thoughtful content, so like they can't really copyright claim you. Like they might be able to copyright claim you for like the footage you're using, but that's easily fixed.
Yeah. And so the nice thing about it is I've actually I can't remember how this happened, but I've been in touch with uh, people from Ubisoft. We had a conversation. I mean, they thanked me for creating the content and just sort of keeping the community engaged. And I asked about what's the policy on me using some of this footage, and so the representative, he told me that because the things that I was using were for how did he say it? Commercial publicity type use.
Mhm.
It was meant to stir discussion and things like that. He said it's fine to use those things in your video.
Mm.
Um, Now, who knows? Who's to say that would be? the policy across all video game companies. That might
Yeah.
not be the case. But if you can, dig a little bit and see if you can find some sort of press release with contact information on it so that you could try to reach out to whatever, especially if you're a video game content creator, whatever company that your game or publisher might be under, to reach out to somebody and just ask them, pick their brain about a couple of things, especially policy about reusing trailers and stuff like that. And you know, once you get the okay from them, you'll be free to do all sorts of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's a good thing.
I think that does that cover everything? Did you have anything else you wanted to hit before we close off for the day here?
No, I am just so happy that this video came down on three themes: passion, performance, and perseverance. I think that's great. And it mirrors our previous episode, which was about you'll have to help me out on this: branding
Yep.
and
Visual identity,
visual identity and oh,
content marketing, I believe.
was that it? Was that it? Okay.
Oh, geez. And now you put me on the spot. Oh
I'm
no.
so sorry. It was so good. I learned so much from that
Well, yeah.
second
Hey, I mean,
podcast.
if you listener, if you like the kind of trifecta piece, we can keep doing that. I think it ends up making a nice way to like bust out bullet points and kind of like recap information.
Yeah, and this one was so organic,
Yeah, it
like
really was.
like organic tomatoes. I'm just
Being a dork.
oh yeah.
Well, thank you so much for listening today, everyone. It was a pleasure again to have you, Dan. I love
Oh,
talking
as
with you about this
always.
stuff. Um, yeah, thank you for listening to this episode of Victory or Death. We will see you next time.
See y'all later.